Everyone, Angelo Carriero, Jimmy Phillips, Jimmy Radio, like we used to have Johnny Manziel, Johnny Football, Jimmy Radio in the house. Welcome in, doing a little, I'll just say a practice round, but a true NFL draft series where Jimmy and I are going to go over the prospects. We're going to do them in position groups as we lead up into the 2025 NFL draft. Today is April 13th, 2025. We're recording at 9 p.m. Eastern time, just so we have a little bit of a time stamp here for whenever you listen to this, because things can obviously change over time when we talk about prospect projections in terms of first round, where they should go, any news of injuries or anything that can go on in between now and then. But the 2025 NFL draft is just a little over a week away, and we thought that we'd get our thoughts recorded. And Jimmy, just to have a good time with the NFL draft, this 2025 NFL draft it's not been great. It's not been great.
It's
We have really struggled to find a sweet spot between where value lies really at the top. And at least from what I'm seeing and hearing is obviously people will talk themselves into guys. And especially when you have a draft that's not necessarily great at the top, you get like defensive players or offensive linemen people get excited about. But even then, I haven't heard a ton of hype around, the offensive tackle class or the defensive tackle class for that matter. So before we get started, because today we are going to do quarterbacks, because why wouldn't we do quarterbacks, baby?
you gotta start with the quarterbacks.
It's what everybody wants to talk about. It's what everybody loves. But before we get to quarterbacks in general, Jimmy, what are your thoughts, your feelings, your opinions? How excited are you for the 2025 NFL draft? Because your team, for the first time in maybe since Nick Bosa, there could have been a pick in between that I'm not thinking of, but you're picking about as high as you've picked in a long time. So what are your feelings about the 2025 NFL draft?
It's been a while since the Niners have been up that high, and for the Niners in the draft, I don't know how to feel because there's so many holes on the team. I mean, they've lost, I think, 9 starters between offense and defense that have gone from last year. So it's like there's not they're not one player away per se, from if they had one more player in the draft, they could get to the Super Bowl. Like if they stayed healthy, obviously last year they would have been there. So it's a weird spot, and where they're slated at, kind of in that middling tier, there it's I've seen them mock to get an offensive tackle, but like you said, you're almost having to reach for a guy to say, you know what, we love him as the number one lineman, because a lot of even the guys at the top, there's a lot of holes in their game this year. There's not that one guy that's like he is going to be solidified 10-year starter.
And you've got guys getting pushed up the board. Like I said, we'll do the offensive tackle class in another episode, offensive line class in general, because it really, I think as we go through all of these positions, there are a lot of flaws with guys, but I think it's almost more, Jimmy, that there are a lot of specialties. A lot of these
Yeah.
guys have certain things they are good at, but then they have holes elsewhere in their game. And I think honestly, Jimmy, we can roll right into it, because there's no more position in this draft that's more indicative of that than the quarterback class. Because I truly think that this quarterback class, and by the way, we're going to be mostly talking about the quarterbacks at the top of the draft. We're going to be talking about 7 names today that have come up throughout the entirety of the college football season and into this NFL draft process. Of course, you're going to have guys later down the line, like, excuse us for not mentioning Dylan Gabriel, which Jimmy might. I'm just talking about in my top 7, a Dylan Gabriel, a Riley Leonard, guys that are more on the peripherals. But Kyle McCord is someone that's been getting a lot of interest coming
Yeah.
from NFL draft pundits and analysts alike. But not going to talk about those guys until the very end. Like, Jimmy, if there's someone that you're talking about that you think is Brock Purdy 2.0, then that's someone we can definitely get into, but won't be getting into those guys today. But is there anything else before we get started with quarterback number 1 on my board before we get started with that, Jimmy?
No, let's see who you got number 1.
Well,
Who
if
is
you've
it?
listened to Jimmy's radio show, which is on ESPN Radio Lex from 10 to noon, sir, that I come
Yep.
on Thursdays. You've heard us talk about that if you've tuned in to that radio show. But at the number one spot, it's pretty obvious for me that Cam Ward is the number one quarterback in this draft class. Cam Ward is an interesting story in terms of how he got here. It reminds me a lot of Baker Mayfield. It reminds me a lot of guys, even if you cross parallel sports like Nikola Jokic or Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, of guys that are not the guys that get talked about, not the guys with publicity, not the guys that have pedigree that come into an NFL draft where those are the guys that most people feel safe taking at the number one overall spot. Cam Ward isn't that guy. He started off at Incarnate Word and then followed his offensive coach to Washington State. And then he decided to take an NIL deal and take a big money move over to Miami, where he was in the Heisman conversation for a lot of this season. Cam Ward is someone that I trust very much in terms of taking him in this draft specifically towards the top of the board if you need a quarterback. I don't particularly think that Cam Ward is the best player in this draft. You can go back to other drafts. Jimmy, I think like even last year's draft class, like I genuinely think that Caleb Williams was the best player and best quarterback prospect in this draft or in that draft.
Yeah.
I think there are times where I think Trevor Lawrence at the time was pretty undisputed as best player, best quarterback. But that's not always the case. I think if you go back to 2019 with Kyler Murray, I don't think that people had Kyler Murray as the best player in that class, but he was a good enough quarterback prospect that the Cardinals, kind of had to take him
Yeah.
at number one overall. And then, of course, your San Francisco 49ers reap the benefit with Nick Bosa at number two.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Which I mean, Kyler hasn't been a bust per se, but you're
no,
right. Yeah.
no, actually, I really like Kyler Murray. I think that Kyler is someone that gets a little too much hate. In fact, I thought that the first half of the season, which I know that there's this Arizona Cardinals kind of criticism when it comes to their second half of the years, but that was more under Cliff Kingsbury. I think it was showed with the Commanders as well, how the second half of the year some offensive numbers did. But anyways, I thought Kyler Murray was an MVP candidate for the first 6, 7, 8 games of the year until it kind of fell off down there in Phoenix. But back to Cam Ward. The thing that makes Cam Ward so interesting to me before we even get to his skill set and to his intangibles and the things that we can like so much about Cam is that I thought that his Miami tape was I don't know how to it was really underwhelming to me when I went through for Cam Ward. If it wasn't for his Washington State play and the guy that he showed at Washington State, I would say, and we'll get into this later, I don't think there would be a first round quarterback this year. I really don't. I think that a lot of what I saw that I like about Cam Ward stems from what he did in 2023 when he was a Cougar. And Jimmy, I've got to say that I not only thought that that tape was good enough to excuse the tape that I thought that he had at Miami. I think that if Cam Ward with that Washington State tape, and I'm trying to say this as well as I can, if it was just that tape, I think he would have had a conversation for me personally to be right there with Jaden Daniels last year. I've watched more of it since the last time we talked about Cam Ward. I think the guy was in better shape, number one. He had more giddy up at Washington State. Like we saw at Miami and especially at the Pop-Tart Bowl where he had that one throw where he just sat in the quarterback and kind of lazily threw like a running back type of swing pass. And people were
Yeah.
like, man, this guy plays so almost too cool. When at Washington State, I thought he played the game about as well and about as respectful and about as determined as a quarterback prospect I've seen in some time. Like to be honest, I kind of fell in love with Cam Ward's Washington State tape. The guy has a tremendous arm, because I think that's really where you have to start with all quarterbacks. I know that arm strength isn't everything when it comes to the quarterback position, but you have to have the arm to play the position. You've got to be able to make enough of the throws in this NFL as well to be off to be off platform, to get rolled out of the pocket, and to be able to adjust your body and hit throws 30 yards downfield or more when a play breaks down. And Jimmy, as you and I talk about the rest of these quarterbacks, I I really think that there has been a shift in the NFL, and I don't think it's. And I'll get your opinion on this in a second before we round back out to the rest of Cam Ward. I don't think that where it used to be Bill Walsh's West Coast offense, and when we were growing up, that you had Peyton Manning, you had Tom Brady, you had quarterbacks that had to play really on schedule. Like there was a
Yeah.
sit in the pocket, you've got to deliver the ball, you've got to deliver the ball from the pocket to all platforms or to all points on the field with accuracy and to have the arm strength to get it there. And I really think that put a value on quarterbacks that were big and could see over offensive lines, that were sturdy enough to take the hits inside of the pocket, that had the arm strength plus accuracy from the pocket to be able to play the position in the way the NFL was once played at a high level. To now, I just don't think the NFL is like that anymore, Jimmy. And I think it's been kind of a slow down over time. But to me, the type of quarterback that you want in the NFL today is a guy that is able to get outside of the pocket, that can make plays when plays break down, and that have the arm strength, the mobility, and the base to be able to break tackles when needed to keep plays alive. So I really think back then when we had a Peyton Manning, I don't know. I mean, Peyton Manning would be great in any era, but I don't think the Peyton Manning prototype fits anymore. I think you look for a Patrick Mahomes, even a Joe Burrow, a guy like Lamar Jackson having so much success. Even bigger pocket quarterbacks like Justin Herbert can run. Do you see the same thing in the NFL today, that the old prototype is gone, or do you still think that's the prototype and we just haven't seen a guy like that in a while?
I feel like it could still be the prototype, but I feel like it's the prototype is shifting because of the product. Like so many of these guys now coming up, they're just better athletes than they used to be. Where before it was, well, the quarterback is just the quarterback. Now all these guys are playing other positions in high school. Like they're growing up to, they're just more athletic than the Peyton Manning, the Brady's, the Drew Brees used to be. So I feel like if a guy like that comes along, you're not going to discount him because like Shedeur is kind of that in this, but even still, he's still much more athletic and can move more than a Brady or a Peyton Manning could. But for this generation, Shedeur Sanders is more of that pocket quarterback. But I feel like moving forward, the prototype is going to be that mobile quarterback. But if we get a guy that comes around that can't move and is a statue, I don't think teams will look away from that because he'll need to make sure that he goes to a system that isn't more of that RPO constantly moving. But most of the systems in the NFL now, because everyone's moving to, you're either a product of Sean McVay or one of those offenses where you have to be able to.
Yeah, very rarely do you have the Kirk Cousins or the Matt Stafford or those type of guys, Matt Ryan, like those type of quarterbacks in
Yeah.
the modern NFL. I think Joe Flacco is a guy, again, all these guys are older quarterbacks. They're all over 30, and they're all guys that even if they have success in the game today, that when you're looking for someone, I mean, we even remember what Kyle Shanahan said, it was rumored that he wanted going into the 2021 class, even though, he really wanted Mac Jones apparently. But he said that the next level of
Yeah.
quarterback was a guy that could run the ball. And you all took Trey Lance, which obviously isn't exactly what you would hope for when drafting someone and trading two
Yeah.
first round picks, but I won't bring up all the bad memories. But I really think you look at a guy like Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels at the top of the draft last year, two different players that Caleb Williams was really able to move inside the pocket. He can run the ball really well, but his athleticism with the ability to torque his body and make throws out of the pocket. And Jaden Daniels is a guy that makes most of his throws in the pocket, but when he breaks pocket, it completely collapses a defense. Cam Ward, I don't think has either of those abilities truly, but what makes him so special is that he can make all of the throws from the pocket, but if and when a pocket breaks down, it is a lot like Joe Burrow that he gets better when things break down. Like when his back's against the wall, that is when he is at his best. The things that I like most about Cam Ward, he has the arm strength to make it all over the field. I thought, especially at Washington State, when it looked like he was honestly in better shape at Washington State, could just be a year of growth, a different program, a lot more that goes around to that. We'll see what kind of quarterback he is in 2025. But I thought that he was really at his best, that he could see he could see a pass rush coming, but then use that to almost dance, like, the bachata, the salsa. He would be able to get into the pocket and then move his way to where he needed to be. And then once they broke contain and he was able to get outside, he was able to make some really special throws, man. I mean, this guy was just downfield vertically. He can really put the ball in the spot. And even at Miami, as much as I didn't love the Miami tape, you could see that he had arm strength to give whenever he would throw bullets into the back of the end zone from far out. And I think that he's mobile enough to move it on the ground. Like, I don't think that he is, like I said, he's not a Jaden Daniels. I don't think he's as good as Caleb Williams was as a runner either. But I think that he's someone that can give you enough on the ground to where if he starts to break into an open field, it'll force a defender to come up, and then that's where he's the most dangerous. I mean, he really waits for people to lose discipline and then put the ball into his playmakers' hands. And, we'd be remiss to, go without saying that his intangibles are really what seems to have solidified him at this moment in time as the number one overall pick in the 2025 NFL draft. People talk about how much of a leader that he is and how much work that he puts into his craft, like his work ethic, the way that he seems to be a leader of men in the locker rooms that he goes into, like what he demands and that he backs it up himself. And, he's got and I don't really take too much stock into this because you can go one of two ways with anybody if they have kids or are single, they're so young. But it seems like that he has a young child and he's very firm in that, like, this is his life, is his family and football. And that's all it is. And for a guy that was a zero-star recruit to work his way up to this level, like I said, it reminds me of Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. It reminds me of Baker Mayfield. It reminds me of Nikola Jokic being a second-round draft pick. Of when you lack pedigree, but you're always working, you're always elevating. Like Baker Mayfield and Shea are the two best examples. Baker Mayfield was a true freshman walk-on, the first ever at the time Power 5. First ever Power 5 QB to be a true freshman, walk on, and start the first game of the season. And he parlayed that into going to Oklahoma, winning the Heisman Trophy, and becoming the number one overall pick. And even Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, like Jimmy, that we're familiar with, he's a guy that was a four-star player, but he was, I think, the fourth or fifth highest rated player in his recruiting class. And a guy like Quade Green was starting over him for half a year, a guy that I like, to be honest, but, that didn't work out. But Shea was so good that he took over that position, and now he's probably going to win the MVP this year. So,
Yeah, and with Cam, I feel like that's such a huge thing that he's gone from a zero-star recruit to where he is, and just that he started over 50 games. Like you can't put enough credit into that of what it means going into the NFL. He started that. Now doesn't matter what level, NAIA, whatever. Just that he's been on the field, starting, controlling a huddle, commanding a huddle, getting the respect of his guys, being a starter for all of those games. I mean, that's a big, big, big thing. And we saw that last year with the guys that succeeded, the rookies. Bo Nix played a ton of football. Jane Daniels played a ton of football. They both had pretty good seasons as rookies. Yeah.
and so lastly on Cam is that I really thought the Miami tape, I thought it was a little, I thought he was less urgent in the Miami tape, it really felt like that the throws were a little less accurate. He was just more going through a lot of the motions, even though that he had a really good supporting cast around him. I mean, I thought that Miami offense had a lot of studs on it. And it's not to say he performed poorly statistically, but when I look at the quarterback that he was at Washington State, he was a guy that when he was in the game, like it felt like an AFC championship game. Like when
Yeah.
Washington State was going, I mean, he was all out. I watched an Oregon game. I watched the Oregon State game. I just, when I saw him play at Washington State in big games, he had the arm strength, he had the accuracy, he had the competitiveness, he had the intangibles in terms of knowing, okay, this is where the defensive line's coming. This is how I'm going to shake him. This is how I'm going to manipulate the secondary with all of my moves. I thought that he was a no doubt about it bona fide number one overall pick at Washington State, a guy that I think could have competed across draft classes for number one overall. But his Miami tape was just enough of like I can see some of the physical limitations and terms and accuracy limitations that may give people pause. But overall, it seems like that the NFL has come around on Cam Ward being number one overall. And if they're getting the guy that they got at Washington State, I think that he's a no-brainer number one overall pick.
Yeah, and I feel like what you said about his Washington State tape being more impressive than the Miami, it's weird because the numbers he put up, he led the country in touchdown passes. He had the most throws of 20 plus yards down the field. But you're right though, when you watch the two films, they don't jump out the same in Miami as they did Washington State. And it's kind of head scratching. It makes you like, what? Do I need to keep rewatching this to get the same juice that I felt from the Washington State film? But I think, like you said, it wasn't bad film per se. It just didn't jump off the screen at you like it did at Washington State. But the only like real negative for me with Cam Ward is, like you said, the nonchalantness or lackadaisical in the pocket where he just will stand there and he's just almost trying to play it too Joe Cool, where he's so in control of everything. And it's like, I don't know how that's going to translate. It, like you said, though, it was more noticeable at Miami than it's ever been, like than it was at Washington State.
Yeah, and that was the thing too, is that you got to wonder if he plays a little too chaotic, like he likes it when it breaks down, so he wants it to get to him, kind of like
Yeah,
Caleb Williams at USC, how there was the jump from 22 to 23 for Caleb, and how everybody loved 22 Caleb, kind of iffy on 23 Caleb, and I was like, well, I'm a 22 Caleb guy. Like if he put this on tape and what he did at
yeah,
Oklahoma, I love him for that. That's kind of the same way with Cam Ward. I think that lackadaisicalness, if you go back and watch that Washington State tape, there's nothing lackadaisical about that guy. That guy was a surgeon. Like I'm
yeah.
so impressed by the Washington State guy, and I hope that that's the guy that comes into the NFL, because if he is, I think that the Tennessee Titans are getting a quarterback that's going to lead their franchise to multiple deep playoff runs. I do. Going to, well, I would say my second ranked quarterback, Jimmy. I'm gonna leave that for the end. I've got a little surprise for you. I'm gonna jump to my number
Ooh,
three quarterback in the class. Okay. My number
okay,
three quarterback in the
okay.
class is Shedeur Sanders. All right. Shedeur, it's pretty much exactly what you said. And it's the thing that worries me the most about Shedeur. He is a guy that has the arm talent, accuracy, and arm strength that mostly plays for what we used to see. He is a pocket passer that can put the ball in all areas of the field, and he can do it with a crispness. He is a more talented in terms of where to put. I think maybe more talented and skilled in terms of how he throws the ball than Cam Ward. I think if you put Shedeur Sanders as like accuracy and layering and finesse onto Cam Ward, that you would get like maybe like, oh, the perfect quarterback prospect or whatever, but you can't do that. But I will say this one thing I love about Cam Ward is that he's a football player that plays quarterback. And I think that comes up sometimes, but the way he really throws the ball. And Shador is a guy that passes the ball. Does that make sense? Like if I say that, do you get a
Yeah,
mental image of what I'm talking about? And do you think that's like a good or
yeah.
bad thing or different?
No, I think it's just that's the players that they are. But you're right. Shador does look like more of that tactician back there at quarterback. Whereas, like you said, Cam Ward is a football player that is a quarterback. Not to take away, but it's one of those analogies. I get exactly what you're saying, but it's hard to elaborate on it anymore. But when you say it, I got the image in my head.
It's that I think that guys that throw the football, the more and more we get into this modern day NFL, like we were just talking about with when quarterbacks need things to break down and go outside of the pocket. Passing used to be so important because you had to stand in the pocket and deliver the ball in all different angles and all different parts of the field. And the layering of the football was so important because it was almost like you were in a, let's say, like a deer stand, right? And you're in that one spot. So you have to be really good at rotating around it and like hitting your targets and being able to be skillful from that one spot. Where I really think that the modern day, you more have to be a guy that's on the run. And then, like when you're moving around, not in stationary. And that's what I love about Cam Ward. And just to go back to Cam Ward for one more thing, it's like Will Levis, I tried to learn from, where Will Levis was an athlete that was trying to play quarterback. Cam Ward's a football player that just happens to play quarterback. And I think that he really throws the ball, and it's impressive for a guy that's a thrower to be as accurate as he is. But it's not to take anything away from Shedeur, because the reasons why I'm not big on Shedeur, and I'll take one more step back, Jimmy. Every quarterback from two on my list, I wouldn't take in the first round if I could avoid it.
Mm,
Every single one of them. I wouldn't take in the first round if I could avoid it. And I'm going to give a caveat when I give you my number two quarterback.
yeah.
And one more thing. I'm so sorry to take it backwards again. If you had to draft Cam Ward somewhere, like how high would you draft him? Because I said that he was going to be the number one pick. I said I would take him number one. But what about you? Would you take Cam number one overall? Where would you say you feel comfortable with taking Cam Ward if you were the GM of an NFL team?
If it's just the real life scenario, not the made up like, well, if it was in this draft class or this draft
No,
class,
this
just if
draft
I'm
class this year,
the
you're a
if
GM.
I'm the Tennessee Titans, if I'm the Tennessee Titans GM and their situation and everything else, I would take him at number one. I do think he is, like you said, in this draft class, he is the best quarterback prospect. And I feel like he's not a big reach. Like I feel like his floor is still pretty high, Cam Ward's, because he's played a lot of football. He does the little things really well. So I would take him at number one with Cam Ward. Now, again, if you want to do the made up scenarios of putting him in this draft class, he's not nearly as high. But in this setting, if I was the Titans, I would feel comfortable taking. But none of the other guys.
Okay. And that's where I get to. And so when I in this group of quarterbacks, I would say that from two to I'm just doing my count. I'm carrying from two to five, I think are all like in the
Yeah.
same pool. And it's really what you want out of a quarterback. And that's why Shador is at three above the rest of the guys, except for my number two, who I'll reveal later. I think Shador is so good at passing the ball that he's perfect for a team that can insulate him. Because the thing that I don't like about him, why he's so much lower, is that he's not a good athlete for the modern day NFL. Like you said, if this was 2005, we'd be like, great, he can
Yeah.
move around a little bit and he can still.
He ran a 4.7.
Yeah, like oh my goodness, like you could feel the turf still warm from when he was running across it. But no, that's the thing though. In this NFL, he's going to come into the league if he's a starter day one as one of the least athletic quarterbacks, which is
Yeah.
surprising being Deion Sanders' son. But that's just the fact of the matter. He doesn't have a lot of great natural athleticism, though that he can move around enough. The thing that scares me the most about him is that, and I know that his measurements aren't very far off from Cam Ward's in a physical stance of like his height and weight per se. He
Yeah.
looks incredibly small on tape. Like he looks really small. And when I watch Shedeur Sanders, I say, I think you're a beautiful passer. Like you really can throw it to parts of the field. And if you can get somewhere where you have an offensive line that are going to keep people away from you and an offensive coordinator that is going to play to your best abilities, I think that Shedeur Sanders can be a starting quarterback at this level. But it all depends on situation. And I don't think, and here's the thing, he reminds me of Bryce Young coming out. But the
Mm,
thing about Bryce Young is I thought that Bryce Young was more of a Houdini in the pocket. Like I think Shador tries to be. I don't think he's as good at
yeah.
it. I think that Bryce Young, even though he didn't have the athletic measurements, the thing that made him the number one overall pick of his quarterback class was that he really was like Steph Curry in a lot of ways in terms of avoiding the pass rushers. You go back and see his highlights at Alabama, and it's like, how did he make that guy miss? How did he make three guys miss on one play? He had this playground type of escapability that then he was able to get out, and he had a massive arm for his size, and he was very, very accurate. I think Shedeur can go toe to toe with Bryce Young in terms of passing skill, but talent, I think Bryce Young was more talented. And I just don't see that with what we saw from Bryce Young, with Shedeur Sanders being, to me, a little less athletic and not as much of a magician, that if he gets in a situation, say, that he doesn't end up in a place that's great for him, let's say New Orleans takes him, and New Orleans is like, we've got our guy. And now they're fighting every single year. They have to extend Taysom Hill until he's 49 years old. And they keep having to give these contract extensions just so they can stay under the salary cap. And everything starts to disintegrate around him. That's a place I just don't think he'd have a lot of success at. And that's the thing that makes him not a first round quarterback to me, is that he's so dependent, in my opinion, of where he is going to end up and what is around him to make him successful, because I don't think he's athletic enough to make plays on his own. I don't think he's big enough to really take the beating at this NFL level. And when all you have is your ability to pass the ball, if you're not able to get it out or get yourself in situations where you can get the ball out, I just don't see how you're going to be a starting quarterback in today's NFL.
One thing to me that stands out with Shedeur in a negative way was, and again, this is one that I've gone back and forth with just in my own head, is it a good or bad, or whose fault is it? But 33% of his throws were at or behind the line of scrimmage last year. 55% of his throws were 5 yards down the field or less. 55%. That's a ton of your throws that it's just click, boom, boom. And now you say, okay, well, what can he do? That's the scheme. It's the system. They were playing with the cards that they were dealt. They didn't have an offensive line. So is that really Shadeur's fault? But you look at that and it's kind of like, to me, that's a red flag of like, woof, okay, so the numbers were good. But the more you look at the tape, it's like, is that sustainable? To where you're looking at that as like, that's his upside. Like, he didn't really show much as far as pushing the ball down the field. But, again, you would have to figure all this out in the interviews. How smart is he? Is he a film junkie, that kind of thing, which you assume he does because he's a second generation NFL player. A lot of those guys are very successful because they know how to do all those little things. And maybe Shedeur could look at that and just say, like, well, yeah, I wanted to push the ball down the field. We couldn't. So maybe it's not as big of a negative. That's an eye popping stat when you read that.
And he's a guy too that it sounds like that you're worried, at least statistically, that when he has to push the ball down the field, that he may lack a little experience in it when it comes to
Yeah.
that, because of his offensive system from Colorado. And then what I'm concerned about is the fact that he's going to be so physically outmatched at the NFL level, that what if you do have to get the ball over the offensive line, over the middle? When is it that you're under pressure and you're smaller and you're going to have to throw that ball or pass that ball, because he's a passer, and you're going to have to pass that ball 20 plus yards downfield to make a play at the end of games? How are you going to be in weather conditions? I know he played in Boulder, but I don't know if there is an athletic limitation to what he's going to have in the NFL when it comes to elements, when it comes to the beating of more physical line plays. And we know that the edges are just getting smaller and faster. He doesn't have the athleticism to really escape those guys. And for me, and when it all comes down to Shedeur, and the reason why I have him third is because I think that if there was a situation where I'm trying to get a quarterback for my NFL team, that his passing ability is so much better than the guys that are coming up after him, that I just feel like that you kind of want to take the gamble on that guy. But again, passers aren't as valued, in my opinion, anymore as they used to be. I really think it's throwers. I think it's athletic guys that can get out of the pocket and throw accurately.
Yeah, you've got to be able to have two different areas that you can attack the defense. So many of these guys have that. And with Shedeur, you're right. It's like he doesn't also have that where he can go to the six different arm slots, arm angles, move off platform. He doesn't really have that. He's kind of in that Jared Goff way where it's like if it doesn't work and he has to move, you might be in a bit of a problem. But the other guys, they all seem so. It seems natural to them where Shedeur naturally can throw the ball, like you said. Like you could tell, he's just got. He was born to throw. He's got that pretty release. But yeah, I don't. I think that's going to be. It could be something he evolves into as he gets into the NFL. But as of right now, you're right. He just has that one plane of attack.
Yeah, that is a perfect point when it comes to him is the Jared Goff comparison, where Jared Goff, I don't think Shador is as much of a statue as Goff is, but you're pretty much
Yeah,
talking about the same thing as guys that are really like really talented passers, but have a lot of limitations that need to really be catered to, which really is funny that you say that because it brings me into draft slotting. And so and this is why I'm going to get to some different situations where if a quarterback were to go round one, like where would I feel comfortable taking him? If I'm Les Snead and I'm the Los Angeles Rams with Sean McVay, like that is a place where if I'm sitting at 26 and Shador falls or it doesn't cost me much to go up to get him, he's someone I would strongly consider taking for that team specifically. Like I wouldn't take him if I'm New Orleans. I wouldn't take him if I'm
yeah,
Las Vegas. I may take him if I'm Miami. Like if Purdy wasn't in San Francisco, maybe. But I think
yeah,
that Shanahan, McVay, McDaniel type of tree, I think that's a spot where Sean McVay will love how smart, because I know the Jared Goff thing, some of it was like Sean McVay didn't like how Goff wasn't as fast as he is, when everything coming out about Shador is that he's a very smart NFL like
yeah,
caliber quarterback. And so if McVay can trust him mentally, I think McVay can do enough around him to protect him physically and let his passing ability shine. And he'd be going to a place in Los Angeles where at least half of your home games are in immaculate weather and you're not going to have to fight conditions. So just like Jared Goff indoors versus
yep,
outdoors, where that's been such a thing that you get Shedeur Sanders in good weather outside of bad weather. So that's my draft range for him. I would feel if I was the GM of a team and I had ownership pressure saying I have to take a quarterback and this is what I'm going to use as I go along, I would much prefer to trade up to the top of the second round or the very bottom of the first round to take Shador. I don't know how comfortable I would feel with taking my first pick, but if I had an infrastructure with Sean McVay, ownership said you need to get us a quarterback, and McVay said like, hey, like Shador's the type of guy that I want, that's where I would feel comfortable. Like, you know what? I think he does have the skill set for you to be able to pull this off. So this is where I feel comfortable pulling that trigger. Where do you find Shedeur Sanders' draft range? Not realistically, I'm talking about for you. Where do you
yeah.
feel it is?
I feel like it would be right around that end of the first round, early second. I feel like if I'm a team, I don't know if I would trade up per se to get Shador because I feel like there's not as big of a gap between him and the other guy that you could just get around that time in the second round. If I'm a team that needs a quarterback, I really would feel just as comfortable staying with whoever gets to me either at the end of the first or second. So I'd say if I have the third, fourth pick of the second round, I would feel comfortable taking him there. Anything ahead of that, I feel like is a reach. Unless you're just like you said, you're that GM that feels pressured by so, but you don't want to take your first pick, like you said, but maybe take a fourth and throw it away and trade it back into the first round. But I'd say late first into the second round, I would be more comfortable with Shador.
And just to clear up the picture, because I think you said you'd be feeling comfortable if a quarterback. Who are your top five quarterbacks before we move on? And like, where do you feel like what are your tiers after you get the top five? Like Cam Ward seems obviously he's in first tier by himself for you. Is Shador in his own tier, or do you think that there are a couple of guys for you that if you got either or, if you stood pat, you'd be okay with?
Yeah, see, and that's I have Cam. Like, there's no debate to me for like, well, it's Cam and it's a close second. To me, it's Cam Ward. I have Jackson Dart second, and I feel very comfortable having him alone also at second. And then
Oh,
from there, it gets more jumbled
huh.
with Shador, Tyler Shuck, and then I even like Kyle McCord. He's been eking up that way to where I feel like he is also in that same realm as the rest of those guys. And then I like Will Howard just because, but again, I would not say Will Howard is in that same. I think those three guys are in their own, and then you have Will Howard that's close. Where if I would feel comfortable with Will Howard in that third, fourth round range. But I have those other guys, Tyler Shuck, Shedeur, and then Jackson Dart would be second.
But Jackson Dart is your firm second. Okay. And we'll get to that.
Yes.
That'll be an interesting conversation for us because at number 4, there's one guy you didn't mention, and he's a guy I know you're not a fan of, and a guy that I can't help but like. It's my number 4 quarterback's Jalen Milrow. And
Ooh.
I
Ugh.
know that
Now, as a
let's
prospect, just as an NFL prospect, I love Jalen Milrow for what you could do with him, but I don't know how he's going to be as a franchise quarterback. So I'm very curious to see what you think. I love Jalen Milrow 2 years ago, but he just didn't improve enough for me this past year to make that jump. So I'm curious what you think.
Well, Jalen Milrow, it's a very good point because what we're about to break down is really the high ceiling, low floor of Jalen Milrow, and I think that there could be an argument that the floor is lower than the ceiling is high when it comes to him. But the one thing I cannot just get out of my mind, and there was one game that really stood out to me that he played, is just his athleticism at the position. It's not Lamar Jackson. I would argue that I think that he's a better runner than Jaden Daniels. I don't think he
Yeah.
might be as fast as Jaden Daniels. I think Jaden Daniels in a straight line is scary, but Jaden Daniels isn't like a running like if you're when people say haha Lamar Jackson's like a running back, like I feel like he could maybe have played receiver, but he was a better quarterback
Yeah.
prospect. I think Jalen Hurts could have been a hell of a running back, but he turned out to be a great Super Bowl winning quarterback. And that's the thing with Jaden Daniels is I'm just like, nah, this guy's he's just really, really fast in a straight line. But people were comparing him to like, I don't know, like Lamar and Robert Griffin and all that. And I'm like, no, he's just fast. He's not like a
Yeah.
shifty runner. He's not like this. Jalen Milroe's a bowling ball of muscle and speed, and I thought that that was
Yeah.
no more on display than his game against LSU this year. He made LSU look silly with his ability to run the ball, with how elusive he was, with how fast he was, with his change of direction, with his power, with his short area quickness when he needed to get a first down. He would scamper to the sidelines where he would just beat the other guys. He also had a game similarly against Georgia. And that's a defense that is littered with NFL first round draft picks. There could be a minimum, I think there will be a minimum of 3 this year come from Georgia. And that's just to say that when I talk about this and why I ended up having him higher, because we're going to get to the lows, is that the 2 games I came away most impressed from with him were Georgia and LSU. And I think that if you try to say, well, the athletes at the NFL level are just different, I kind of beg to differ. Not that NFL athletes aren't better than college athletes, but on some fields, you got a 7th round pick from nowhere state. And on this field, because we're one draft class apart, that this NFL player is so much better than this college player. No, Jalen Walker would be one of the top 3 defenders on 75% of the NFL teams this year
Yeah.
because of how talented he was. And that's just an example of guys that he was going up against. Malachi Starks would maybe be a 1st round pick. Jalen Milrow was doing his thing. Like it was just he's such a good and talented athlete that I think it can make up at least during his rookie contract deal. And this is where it's going to be very specific on where his career ends up ultimately. But his passing his passing is where I think that you have definitely the biggest issue. And for me, I have a sizable issue because if I don't think you say that he's just not a natural thrower. Like, I don't think he's a guy that was just a running back that they put out there in a pinch and he stuck on. Like, I see
Hmm.
a little bit more technique. The one thing that I like more, and not to hate on your guy, unfortunately, because we'll get to him very soon, is that I I like that he doesn't look at the defensive line pass rush coming. I think that he trusts his athleticism enough that he keeps his eyes downfield when he feels a pressure coming. And I think that that is a skill that is imperative in the modern day NFL. That when you see it, like if you know a pass rush is coming, it has no more important in, I don't know. I say now, but Blaine Gabbert had the same issue where if you look down at the pass rush, you're going to lose the play. And I think that
Yeah.
Jalen does a great job of keeping his head up. He evades and he tries to make the throw. And that is the thing, is that
Yeah.
it's not as much as that he's a little bit off all the time. I think he's on sometimes and he is incredibly off other times. And it is very, very hard to buy into a guy to be your franchise quarterback, like you're saying, Jimmy, to a point where I actually agree with you because I don't think he's as good of an athlete as Lamar. I think Lamar is literally the greatest quarterback athlete we've ever seen. And I'm a guy that saw Michael Vick. I loved Cam Newton. Lamar Jackson is a like 1% tier athlete for his speed and elusiveness and all that. Jalen Milroe's just a great athlete. And I think that that's what separates that. So you have to be better as a thrower. I think for a rookie contract, for a guy that's going to be cheap, if you're a team that is paying a lot for other positions and you need someone to come in, I use this example because there's only really one team, I think, Jimmy, that I would want to drop Jalen Milroe into as a first round pick. Like if Steelers ownership came to me and said, we need an insurance policy for Aaron. We want somebody after him, or Aaron Rodgers isn't coming. One of the two. We need a quarterback in round one. I think we saw with what Arthur Smith wanted to do in Atlanta with Desmond Ritter and the way that he loved to like run his quarterbacks and he runs a run heavy scheme. And you play in an AFC South, or excuse me, an AFC North. I don't know why I said South. An AFC North where you have Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. You're in cold weather and you need someone that's physical, that's fat, that's dynamic. I think where you're paying for DK, you're paying for TJ, you're paying for Mika, you're paying for Cam Hayward. You have all this money tied into these other positions. I think that Jalen Milroe is a perfect fit for that football team to come in and be the quarterback for the next couple of years. And then you can reassess. Did Jalen develop as a passer enough? And then you can see if you need to move on at the quarterback position. Is he Jalen Hurts or is he Malik Willis? Is the biggest question that you have. And Jimmy, to be honest, I think he's probably more Malik Willis, which is why I have him this low. If you said I need a franchise quarterback in this draft, out of this group of guys, I wouldn't take him. I'm too worried about the long term passing.
Yeah, but I feel like he has that potential to where if you could get this guy in the third round, fourth round, and he goes to a team and an offensive coordinator that is has enough protection from his ownership, he feels comfortable enough that he can experiment with Jalen Milroe. I mean, he to me, he's got enough talent to where he could be like the new, not prototype of what teams are looking for, like Taysom Hill, but on a whole nother level where I feel like he's a similar type. He can be a similar type runner as Taysom Hill. He's not as big, but he, like you said, he is a just a bowling ball of muscle. So I feel like he's a better thrower than like they could do more passing packages with him than they do with Taysom Hill. But he has the potential to be that type of Swiss Army knife to an offense to where I feel like that's not degrading him as a quarterback. Where it's like, with Lamar, it was like, we'll just throw him at receiver. He can't throw. Like, no, it's not that with Jalen Milroe. He can do creative things, but if you are just drafting him as a franchise quarterback to just be a quarterback, I would not be very confident. But if you get someone who's creative, he could be the steal of the draft. Like that's his potential. He could be a flame out in 2 years or the steal of the draft.
Yeah, that really is the when it comes to the development of his passing, and I just think, yeah, he could be a franchise quarterback if everything breaks right. But I think that we see more often than not, Jimmy, and I'm going to be honest, the tape shows you the truth. And the truth is
Mm-hmm.
he's just not an NFL level passer. And so if you're really going to get the most juice out of him early, and that's if he's going to be successful at the next level. What the
Yeah.
tape showed me on the guy number 5 in my quarterback list is tape that I just don't know what to do with. And usually, if I have this many questions, that I'm very much am scared off away. But what I love about this section and what I said at the beginning of this podcast was that the 2025 NFL draft, there are so many specialists. You've got so many guys that are really skilled at like one thing or have errors in some ways, but then have really, really great traits. And there are different quarterbacks for different measures, which is why I think all of these guys, if you had to make me pick a first round quarterback, that it would just depend on the situation. Where could he go? Where would he succeed is best insulated. And if you told me that I'm a GM, that I have 3 years out of these quarterbacks. I have 3 years to develop a guy. We don't need someone right away, but we want someone with the highest ceiling of this second tier group. Then Jackson Dart would be that pick for me. The problem is that I do not like the short term gain that you're going to get from a Jackson Dart. I think that Jackson Dart is the most physically skilled quarterback in the all phases. Jalen Milroe is easily the most physically skilled quarterback of the class, but in terms of as a passer and runner and body, all of that combined, I think that you have to give the nod to Jackson Dart. He is tall. He's tall enough for a quarterback. He's got a stout frame. I think that he's the most athletic quarterback out of like him, Cam, Shedeur. Like I do. I think
Yeah.
he's the best runner out of those three. I think he runs the ball pretty interestingly too. Like it's not a burner. It's a little like Caleb Williams in a way where he just kind of sneaks his way when he's running to get to certain spots. That's not to downplay the number one thing. I mean, he has the best arm strength. I think maybe him and Cam are kind of right there in terms of functional arm strength because I know that people say Jalen Milroe's arm is huge, but I can, you can shoot a
Yeah.
cannon. It doesn't always have the most accuracy.
Yeah.
It's more of a
Not about
varied
just you
range
can
for,
throw a ball. Yeah, it's not you can throw a ball 78 yards. It's what are you doing with it?
yeah, the Joe Milton effect and pretty much
Yeah.
on that one. And I think Jackson has a very strong functional arm. And I think that he throws with a lot of zip. And that's what I like out of him. I know that, he can throw the ball deep. My two biggest problems with him, Jimmy, and I'll compare it to this. It's like in a video game where if you get a player that you're like, oh, I have 1,000 points to spend on my player, and you spend it all on arm strength, you spend it on speed, you spend it on this, and then it's like, oh, I forgot to save some for accuracy and awareness because those
Oh, what
things aren't
about awareness? Yeah, the awareness it'll get you.
those things aren't fun. But when you have
Yeah.
fun, it's the arm strength and the running and all that you see. So from Jackson, the thing that worries me the most is just the one thing I love about Jalen Milroe is that Jalen Milroe, when he feels a pass rush coming, he's able to keep his eyes up, move his body, and read the play as the rush is coming. Jackson Dart looks immediately down to the offensive line, immediately down to the pass rushers. He just seems to have that tick of it's coming. Where is it coming from? So I know where to run. And to me, that reminds me of Blaine Gabbert. That reminds me of these Zach Wilson. That reminds me of these quarterbacks that have had an extremely difficult time adjusting to the NFL. Is because they don't have that like sixth sense of moving around the pocket and doing these things that make you successful at the NFL level, though he has all of the traits that you want out of a modern quarterback. He's able to get outside the pocket. He's able to throw on the run. He's got a big arm. But he, obviously, Jalen Milroe, I think we would agree, is the least accurate quarterback out of this group of QBs. I would say that outside of your top, like inside of your top five, he's the second least accurate. Like he is a quarterback that's it's not always. It's not in every possession, but I see that when he gets rattled and he kind of needs to throw it, okay, I need to throw it now that the rush is coming. He loses where guys are. He'll throw risky pass over the middle. He overthrows deep balls. He has this combination of lack of accuracy um plus the lack of awareness when a pass rush comes that I would be fine if an NFL team told me, if an owner said, I want a quarterback and I want a superstar, and you have the time to develop them, then Jackson Dart's the one that I could give you and be like, I think he has the most superstar upside of this group. But again, it's the tangible nature of the same thing with Jalen Milroe. We can say if Jalen Milroe could throw 60 yards on a dime that he would be the best quarterback in the class. But yeah, I mean, if I had 999,000 more dollars, I'd be a millionaire. It's just how realistic are we getting to that point? And for probably the biggest difference is that we see the same things, Jimmy and Jackson Dart. I think it's a lot less realistic that he is going to fulfill that promise than maybe you do.
Yeah, and I feel like too, it's one of those you look at the positives and then you look at the negatives and you say, okay, which are most likely to be fixed at the next level or as you progress as a passer. And I feel like because he has the arm strength, he has the ability to push the ball down the field, those layered throws, stuff like that. He has enough mobility. I feel like if he's somewhere where he can feel more comfortable with the system that he's in, then maybe that would help him when he's out there. But you're right about the looking at the pass rush. That is something when you get to the next level. It's because the game moves so much faster that, that's what you hear all the quarterbacks say, just how fast everything moves. And if your eyes are down for a split second in the SEC, you can get away with it when you've got a guy like Trey Harris out there on the outside. You can just throw the ball up to him if you need to. But it's not always going to be that way when you get to the NFL. So that could be a detractor for Jackson Dart.
That I'll tell you what, it reminds me a lot, to be honest, of Johnny Manziel and Mike Evans at Texas A&M. But we'll get it to when we get into wide receivers. I think Trey Harris is incredible. I think that he has a limit of ceiling just due to athleticism, but I think Trey Harris is awesome. I think he makes Jackson Dart sometimes look a lot better than he was. And so you would take it. How high would you take him?
If I have to pause for a while. Like if I'm New York at 3, would I take Jackson Dart like over Shedeur? That's been the talk if they would take Shedeur. I don't think I would there. Now, if I was New Orleans at 9, I think I would take Jackson Dart there. I don't want Jackson Dart to go. That's a terrible situation to go to. I don't want any quarterback to go there. But if I'm them at 9 and I want a quarterback, I would be willing to take him there. Not at 3. I would have to keep convincing myself to take him at 3.
Yeah, I would say that this ends my range of guys I would be willing to take a shot at in the second round. I think my number 2 to my number 5 quarterbacks are all second round guys to me that I would feel in one way or another comfortable enough with these players. And it all just depends on position and scheme. Jackson Dart is the one that you could really put anywhere. I think that the place I would feel most comfortable with him would be a place that has a quarterback where he can sit for years and learn from, but one you have to replace eventually. I don't know which one off the top of my head that fits the most in terms of a quarterback aging out, but still good enough to get the job done. But if he was the guy that the Packers took instead of Jordan Love, like I had a little bit more faith in Jackson Dart being like reaching
Yeah.
his ceiling more than Jordan Love consistently reaching his ceiling. He would have been someone that, like, if you sit behind Rodgers, I still wouldn't have liked it. I still think it would have been a slight reach, but I think there's a little more to work with Jackson Dart in terms of athleticism and arm strength. But I think my number 2 to number 5 are all second round guys. So I've given you 3, 4, 5. Let's quickly go over 6 and 7, and then we'll get to number 2 to cap it off. Number 6, I have Tyler Shuck out of Louisville. He's a guy that started games at Louisville, started at Texas Tech. He's had a lot of experience. I think the third round range is where it starts for him. I really didn't like his first couple of tapes. I know I watched Boston College and I watched another one. It may have been Clemson. I'm trying to rack my brain to see which one it was. And I was ready to really write him off, but I watched him against Notre Dame and he had a really good game against Notre Dame. And Notre Dame is where he really shows you like what he's capable like of. I think that I think he's like the fourth oldest player in this draft. Like he's 25 and a half.
He'll be 26 by like week 3 of the NFL
Yeah.
season.
I think he's a third round pick at the highest. I think he is a medium upside, low ceiling type of guy. Like if he's, because I don't think he's super athletic. I think he's big and has a good enough arm, but he doesn't have like a super strong arm. He's not very athletic. I just think that he's someone that if you need a cheap backup quarterback, that he's somewhat, but if he comes in the NFL and he doesn't have the physical nature, then he's out of the league. Right. So
Yeah.
I just don't have a lot of faith in him. Do you have a range for him? Do you have any thoughts or feelings about Tyler Shuck? I know he's more in that third tier for you, I think.
Yeah, but he is one that it's I was more impressed with him the more that I watched, and the fact that he's had injuries, but I feel like when a guy breaks his collarbone twice, or he had a collarbone in his shoulder, and then he breaks his leg, I don't know if that's broken bones are different than like if he keeps pulling his hands, like soft tissue injuries. I don't know if that's something that you could really, because he's a bigger guy. It's not like he's small and he's getting hurt. So it could just be those are just bad, tough luck on his that he had getting those. But I think, like you said, if he can go somewhere and develop behind somebody, that's why if I'm a team that needs a quarterback and I'm at the tail end of the first round, is that there that much of a difference between like a Tyler Shuck and then like the Kyle McCoy, like those types of guys? I feel like they're all kind of in that same range. Even a Jackson Dart, like of all the guys, I would take a reach on him. Now I would still even say reaching, it would be a reach if you took a Jackson Dart at 9, but I would still take him there. I don't know if I would take any of these other guys, but they're still in a pretty close range to me. So it's like, I feel like the bang for your buck, if you could get a guy like Tyler Shuck in the third round, in the fourth round, and you're a team like Oakland who has Geno Smith. Geno Smith's not going to be there for 3, 4 years. You're thinking maybe 2 years. Yeah, but if he could go somewhere like that, I feel like that would be a pretty good spot, pretty good value.
Yeah, then by the time he takes over for Geno, he'll be as old as Geno is right now. So
That is true. That would not be good.
I
He's
know that was a
26.
pot
That would
shot.
be the one. Yeah, that would be the one downside. But that is crazy. Like that he's the fact that he's 26 and is going to be coming in, and how many of the starting quarterbacks, like Sam Darnold, I think just turned 26.
Yeah, no,
It seems he's like been in the league for a decade.
it's crazy. It's crazy. And then lastly is at 7 is Quinn Ewers. I watched a couple of tapes of Quinn, and I know I watched him during the season. I love his pedigree. Like I love what he was built out to be, but I don't know how that Texas season could have gone any worse. He was a guy that needed to transfer, go get a starting job at the college level, maybe even go to like Tennessee now that they don't have a quarterback in house. Like it's
Yeah.
just I really thought that Quinn Ewers would have given me something to be hopeful for to
Yes.
where I could push him up the board because I like the idea. Like he's a gunslinger, he's athletic enough, but he's really makes his hay with his strong arm and accuracy to deep levels of the field. I mean, the games I saw, it was a horror show, man. Like I wouldn't feel like I'm not gonna lie to you, Jimmy. I would probably have Quinn Ewers as like a UDFA. Like if he went undrafted, I would bring him in and see like okay, like
Yeah.
we didn't have to spend a pick on you. Come in, we'll give you some money. Like we'll try to get the every last drop out of you. But I think that Quinn Ewers, from what I saw, if they said, "Do you want to spend a draft pick on him or not?" I would honestly say no.
Yeah, and it's like you said, I wanted to like Quinn Ewers so much, and he has been given every opportunity to be the number one pick in whatever draft he comes out. He's been the Heisman right there in the Heisman talk. Starter at Texas for 2 years. With the high points that he has, he looks great, but the bad is so bad. And maybe last year when it came out that he played with a torn lat the entire season, that made sense. Where it's like okay, because it did look like he didn't have the same zip on the ball as he did. The ball just always seemed to float in the air for so long. Now it's a pretty ball, and he usually will put it where it needs to go. But you look at those kind of throws, you're like, that's not safeties in the NFL are going to get it because you saw the safeties and DBs talking about Shedeur patting the ball. Oh, we're going to break on that. No, everyone does that. But these Quinn Ewers, the lollipops he's throwing, again, they're beautiful balls and they can work in college, but I just don't see it. And I wanted to see so much in him to make me say he's a first round pick, but I don't see it.
Well, they work when he's accurate. And that was the thing. I even went back to 2023 a little bit. And granted, I have a little more to do on his 2023 stuff to really get the juice out of the squeeze out of the juice, or whatever. Juice out of the squeeze, whatever you want to say. But I saw even in Oklahoma in 2023, I was just like, gosh, this is not good. Like this
Yeah.
is rough. And I think that even like Arch looked better than him this year. And the torn lat is a thing. I want to go back and watch more. And honestly, I think that it would do me well. Like Kyle McCord is someone that I haven't gotten my eyes on yet that I really want to, because he has some profile that I think I would really like from someone as like a pocket passer. He was good at Ohio State, but he was kind of defamed. So he went to Syracuse and had a huge year. Like I would like to watch that. So maybe when we do our draft recap, that I'll come back and kind of say that he was, you know, on point. Jimmy, are you still there? Oh, okay. There we go. Sorry. Are we good? Can you hear me? So it's just someone that I could go back and get more of a feel on would be Kyle McCord for the Syracuse tape and whatnot. But oh, I don't feel good about this. But it's something that when I watched and I really tried to stretch my mind, I can really go one of two ways here, and I could take it either way. My number two quarterback in this class, from everything that I've seen, is Will Howard.
I love that.
I will say this like on camera. Like I'll say just as point blank as possible. I'm not in love with it. And I think that if anything, it goes to define how weak this quarterback class is after Cam Ward and how uncertain everything can be, because Will Howard is a guy that I watch, Jimmy, and I would love your like a little bit of a longer take if you have one about him, is because I watch him and I can't tell if he is a guy that can give you everything at the NFL level, or a guy that is not good enough at anything at the NFL level. I struggle so much with that, because what I said about Shedeur Sanders, beautiful passer, physical limitations. Jalen Milrow, super athletic, doesn't have the throwing capabilities. You have Jackson Dart, who's just so raw. He's just so extremely raw. But if you asked me, and I try to think of this from a GM standpoint, if you told me that I had to go get a quarterback to win now, I said I think Shedeur Sanders has the best chance of like he's like a really nice passer. He has all the skill set. If you can insulate him, I think you get a lot out of that. If I needed a quarterback that could come in and be dynamic, like I need someone that's a game changer at the quarterback position, and I need him this year, then I would take Jalen Milrow, because I think he can bring you that. If I had an owner that came and said, I want someone that's going to be a superstar, I'll give you 3 years, then I would take Jackson Dart. It's all situational. But if I had a GM, or if I had an owner that said, I need you to get someone that can come in and win football games and be a guy that I know it sounds so cliche, but a guy that is a winner, a guy that we're going to put back there and he's going to be able to play quarterback at the NFL level right now, I'd take Will Howard. From what I saw at Ohio State, and again, this is when we get to it, I'm going to hit each of these points and see. In terms of build, he's got it. Like out of all of these quarterbacks, he's 6'4" and a half. He's 235 pounds. He's got 9-inch hands, which I think is just above the criterion for the baby hands,
Yeah.
claims for someone like that. But he is a really big guy. And then when you talk about athleticism, I actually thought that he would be more athletic on tape, considering that at Kansas State he was a dual threat guy. Like he rushed for over 1,000 yards in his collegiate career. He had 12 touchdown rushing in his last year at Kansas State. He's a guy that like really was lauded for his ability to run the football. And then I watched the Ohio State stuff and I was like, man, he's a little stiff when he runs. Like I actually don't see the athlete. But the thing is he's had so many rushing reps and he's had so many opportunities that like he's a guy that you can say comfortably at the NFL level, like it's on his resume. Like
Yeah.
he may not be great at it, but you know he can do it. And that's the thing. He was also a two-time, I think, like all-region basketball players, 1,000-point scorer in high school. You got to love the quarterbacks that played like multiple sports because you know that they're guys that were just great athletes in high school too. Um, what I came away most impressed, I think, was his ability to stand in the pocket and deliver the football. And that's what really is swinging me more to quarterback 2 than to quarterback 6 for me, or quarterback 5, because it would push the other guys up. But the
Yeah.
swing from 2 to 5 is that when he stood back there and delivered the ball, he was strong, he was upright, it was good, like good mechanics, good motion, and it was always like relative accuracy. Like he really needs to work on like getting it kind of pinpoint, but he was really good at delivering the ball. And he can do it over across the middle. He can do it over into the sideline. He can do it down the field. He is probably the most pocket like passer out of this group of guys in terms of having the size and the arm to deliver it to all sides of the field. He just, even the thing is that Ohio State, like they protected him really well, so you didn't really get to see when things broke down. But he's a guy that I think that you saw enough of that he can manipulate defenses with his eyes, keep them downfield until the last second, make the smart throw. My worry with him is that I see a guy that could potentially be a starter with the intangibles, with the physical nature. I mean, you know that he could do the tush push, which is what I think is important these days. He's got the size to handle up to it. My worry, Jimmy, is that what if he is just not good enough at any of those things, and you just get a real backup quarterback? And that's why, again, even though he's my number 2 at the moment, he's still a second round guy, and I think he swims in the same pool. And it really just depends on what ownership would want. Like I don't feel great about it, but when I watched it, and it really came out when I was watching Emeka Egbuka, like I was like, oh man, like there's something here with this guy. And I don't know if he's good enough, but if he is good enough, then he is a guy that can be a starting quarterback in the NFL.
I feel like of all the guys in this class, he's the name you hear nothing about. I mean, Riley Leonard's up there too, but like that Riley Leonard's not the prospect that Will Howard is, but there's no chatter about Will Howard. And I don't understand it. The only person I've heard say anything positive about Will Howard was Pat McAfee after the national championship. And then after Will Howard didn't, perform well at the Pro Bowl, it's kind of quieted, or at the combine, he kind of quieted down. But there's been no one else talking about it, and I don't get it because he wins. He seems like everyone on the team loves him. Seems like a great locker room guy. I watched John Gruden had him on his the quarterback guru, whatever he does now, and he seemed awesome, just like a dude. And I feel like that's what a team wants. And maybe there's NFL GMs, they're not talking about him on purpose because there's a lot of teams that see him and they're like, hey, if we could just keep it quiet on this Will Howard guy that won a national championship, that had one of the best playoff runs that any college quarterback's ever had in a 4-game stretch. And again, that's what he does. He performs when it matters. The 2 bad moments of it that he had this year was against Oregon when he slid a quarter of a second too late, and he had a bad second half against Michigan. You could say he might have been concussed in that game.
Yep.
There's a play at the goal line that looks pretty obvious what happened. So you could look at that and it's like, okay, you take those 2 things out, and he's a pretty damn good prospect. Like I don't see where the negatives are, and he is in that range with me with like the Shedeur, Tyler Shuck, and Kyle McCord, where it's like I feel like they're all way closer together than most years you would have. Like you could flip flop them in that 2 to 5 range pretty easily.
Yeah, my biggest worry again is that I think it's just, is he too average? Like
Yeah.
pretty much if you took the second best quarterback out of like trait out of Shedeur, Jalen, and Jackson and put him into a quarterback, you'd get Will Howard. Like he's nowhere near the passer Shedeur is, but he's probably on like Jackson Dart's level. He's nowhere near the athlete Jalen Milroe is, but he's probably close to Jackson Dart's level. He doesn't have Dart's arm strength, but I would say that it's up there with Shedeur's, And so that's the thing is that, okay, am I putting too many 7 out of 10s together? And is that really going to be an NFL quarterback that can start games? But when when you go on the run, he did. And here's the other thing is that his offense was, people could say, oh, it's so loaded. I don't care about the skill position being loaded. I care like how great the offensive line was. Like when
Yeah.
it breaks down, is it going to be more like Kansas State where your accuracy really starts to be variable? So that would, I say, would be my biggest worry with him. I wouldn't feel comfortable taking Will Howard in the first round. Like I'll say that. But if I had to, like if I had a team like Detroit, and they were like, we're going to move on from Goff like this season.
Hmm.
We need someone that can come in and like stand up to the NFL like rigors to go to like through an offensive coordinator, run a playbook, and be able to maximize our skill position guys and win like and be a winner. I think that could be Will Howard. And so it really just does depend on the position of all of these guys. And with just Howard, I saw enough zip, enough running, enough like size and winning that I was just like, this guy, I think that you could feel a little variably better about him than the rest of the ones before him about being a winner in the NFL, like hitting. I think the other guys have higher ceilings, but he doesn't have the floor that these other guys have. And so that's just kind of where I landed with it. And again, I don't feel great about it. You said third or fourth round, definitely second round for me. Someone that, again, I would only want to take if I need someone right away. Like if you're developing someone, I'd rather have like a Dart or Shedeur or someone. But I just couldn't get away from like when the high moments for him on top of like where he was just always variably like pretty good on tape. I was just like, well, I can't ignore that. But it just goes to show this quarterback class. Oh, and lastly, Las Vegas Raiders. Chip Kelly's the offensive coordinator. He was the offensive coordinator at Ohio State last year. Could there be
That's a pretty
something
good year.
there to be the Geno
Yeah.
succession plan? That would be extremely interesting. Tom Brady going from over the Michigan to Ohio State to grab his quarterback of the future there. But do you have any final thoughts on this quarterback class on the Will Howard thing? So my top seven at this moment, as much as it pains me because I'm so unsure if Will Howard's really underrated or just really average, but it would be Cam Ward, Will Howard, Shedeur Sanders, Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart, Tyler Shuck, and Quinn Ewers. In that order. Those are the seven guys that I've spent the most time watching. I think Cam Ward is in a tier by himself as a franchise level quarterback if he can get back to that Washington State tape. And I think that the rest of 2 through 5 are second round players. And then everybody else is third round for Shuck, Ewers, UDFA, like that type of thing. Any final thoughts or comments from you?
Just the more I look at this quarterback class, I feel like there's more guys on here that are going to have solid NFL careers. I don't know how many great NFL careers, but like Kyle McCord, I see, or not Kyle McCord, Will Howard, I see being around in the league for a good 10 years. I see a lot of these guys hanging around the league, but I don't know. I'm very curious how many. I would be shocked if only two quarterbacks go in the first round. There's going to be at least three. I think there's a chance for four, but who is that fourth going to be? Not that they deserve to, and like the grades you're putting on it, but we know how NFL teams are. We know how they go. So trying to figure out which two are going to be the shock at the end of the first round, the Tim Tebow in the first round, where everyone's looking around like, what just happened? So I'm curious. How many do you think are going to go? I'm going to say four are going to go in the first round. And I feel like that's being kind of going a little bit over the top. I think three would be a little safer, but
I'll I'll go I'll go three. I think I personally think they're. If I was to be bold, I would say two. I would actually go the other way.
mm,
I think that I could see Shador, Cam, obviously, and then it's
yeah.
Shador. To me, I think will end up being a first round pick. I think he has the passing ability of a first round player, and I think with all the stuff with him is that some team could take a chance on him. I just think that Dart's a little raw, but with the hype on him right now, but that can vary. Like we've had hype on guys before. I mean, Malik Willis was thought to be a top six pick at one point, and he went in the third round. Like it's really
Yeah.
hard sometimes to see what is smoke and what's not. Dart's been around long enough and has that background. I'll go three on that, but I could see Milroe going to Pittsburgh and Dart,
Hmm.
someone trading up for, one of these guys. Real quick, because I was thinking of it. because we're talking about like where, like how many quarterbacks we think go. Do you have comparisons? Like I'll give you a comparison, and if you have one, you can give one. But
Mm.
Cam Ward, Steve McNair is someone that I think is very popular with Cam Ward. I think that McNair may have been a little bit better of a runner when he was younger, but I like their ability to kind of throw and do things over the field. Do you have one for Ward, or do you want me to go through mine
Not
and
for
just,
Ward though.
yeah?
I only really have one that has stuck out to me the last
Mhm.
couple weeks, and it's Matt Ryan with Shedeur Sanders.
Wow,
I
that's
feel like,
interesting.
and it
Huh.
only hit me just watching some of his stuff at his pro day. The way his release is looks very similar, just in my just eyeball test, to what Matt Ryan was. And then I looked up their draft profiles. They had kind of similar profiles. Matt Ryan was a bigger guy. He's 6'4", where Shador's like
Hmm.
6'1" and a half. But I feel like they had similar pros and cons about their game. So I feel like that was one to me. And the more that I thought about it, I'm like, yeah, I could see that, like, if that's the comp to where he is, he can't really push the ball deep down the field, but is a cerebral player, can get in trouble with not being mobile, those kind of things. So that's the big one I have for these five that I've had conviction with over the last couple of weeks. From like I feel good about that comparison.
I I can see that. I think mine for Shador, I'll go in order. Like Cam Ward with Steve McNair, Will Howard, and this is more of a what I think he could be in the NFL level. Is actually the guy that starts for the team on your shirt is Brock Purdy. As a guy that comes in, and I think Purdy is a little kind of twitchier of an athlete, but he's smaller
Mm-hmm.
too. Like Will Howard's just a bigger guy, but I think he's a guy that could come in and kind of run the offense in that sort of way. A little bit of different players, but in that same realm of where I could see Howard come in and just be that like quote unquote winner and maybe give you a little more juice than you thought. Shedeur Sanders, mine was Bryce Young. He reminds me a lot of that. I think that he's not as athletic as Young was coming out. Jalen Milrose, Malik Willis. Like the more that I said it, I think that's why his name's come up so much this podcast was because of recency. I'm a Packers fan, and he came in and was really able to run the ball, and I think that that could be. Uh, I think that that's a more in the ballpark. Obviously, on the high side, you'd want to go with someone more fun, but that would be it for me. And then Jackson Dart, he's just raw, looks at the line. Any of those strong arm throwers that, tend to struggle to make it. Maybe we'll go Blaine Gabbert since I said that, and then that'll be the top five. So, Jimmy, thank you so much for joining me today. I know that we want to do a series where next one we'll do running backs and wide receivers. Then we'll get to running backs, receivers, tight ends, pretty much the skill positions. Then we'll get an offensive,
Yeah.
defensive line, and then end with linebackers, safeties. Because by the time we're done with this, Jimmy, NFL draft's going to happen, and then we're going to have reactions. So I appreciate you coming on.
Of course, it's been fun. This time of year is always great, and the closer we get to the draft, you get the more rumors that start popping up and everything. And this is there is no off season for the NFL, but this truly is the best part of the off season.
That's my favorite part, and you've always known that. Well, Jimmy, good luck to you on your week to next week as your show. You're getting ramped up for the NFL draft, and we will see everyone here in just a couple of days. I think tomorrow night's when we're going to be doing the running back, wide receiver, tight end trio. So for Jimmy Phillips, or Jimmy Radio as I call him, and Angelo Carriero, we will see you on the next episode of our NFL draft mini series.